In 2018, the daring rescue of 12 boys and their soccer coach trapped by flooding in a cave in Thailand captivated the world.
How many of you? 13. Brilliant.
Christina Soontornvat's nonfiction children's book, All 13, The Incredible Cave Rescue of the Thai Boys Soccer Team, tells the story from a more local perspective, examining the culture and the spiritual beliefs that help the team persevere.
You know, I wanted to write about Thai culture, the Thai people, Buddhism, and spiritual practices. And also the story is about the kids that were in the cave. Like, they were just as heroic as anyone who was trying to rescue them. And so I really felt like their story needed to be told for young people.
Soontornvat also draws upon her background as a mechanical engineer and a STEM educator to explore the science behind the rescue.
Okay, you're thrown into this big crisis. People's lives are on the line. You have a short time window. You have a short amount of resources. How are you going to solve this problem? It was all of this engineering problem solving that I learned when I was in school, and they were putting it to use in real life. So that was just so great.
Emily McAvoy from the St. Louis County Library joined Soontornvat to discover the story behind the story in today's interview.
Welcome to today's author event. My name is Emily McAvoy and I am the Teen Services Coordinator for St. Louis County Library. Our event today is produced in partnership with HEC Media. This project is supported by the Institute of Museum and Library Services under the provisions of the Library Services and Technology Act as administered by the Missouri State Library, a division of the Offices of the Secretary of State. Our event bookseller is Novel Neighbor, an indie bookstore in Webster Groves with the best selection of young adult literature in the area. And we so appreciate you supporting our author and our indie bookstore partner with your book purchase. Our author today is Christina Soontornvat. You may know Christina from the series Diary of an Ice Princess and her 2021 Newbery Honor book, A Wish in the Dark. Christina is joining us today to talk about her outstanding nonfiction book, All 13, The Incredible Cave Rescue of the Thai Boys Soccer Team, which received the 2021 Kirkus Prize for Young People's Literature and is also named a 2021 Newbery Honor Book. Hi, Christina, welcome.
Hi, Emily. It's so good to be here with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So, just as a little refresher, for those that don't know or have kind of forgotten about it, could you tell us about the Thai boys soccer team and what happened to them in 2018?
Sure. So, in that year, there was a soccer team of 12 boys and their coach, so 13 in total. And on a Saturday afternoon, after they finished up with soccer practice, they decided that they wanted to go hiking in a cave that was very close by to them. So this all takes place in northern Thailand, in the border town of Masai, Thailand, in the mountains of the north. Those mountains are full of caves, and it's a very normal and regular thing to do to go and visit them and like go explore the caves. So the boys and their coach hopped on their bikes after soccer practice and went to the cave and started exploring. And while they were there, the heavy rainfall outside created flooding inside the cave. And so the cave flooded and the boys were trapped. And in fact, they were trapped for 10 days before rescuers were able to even locate where they were. And then it took another 8 days to actually rescue them and get them out of the cave. The team that rescued them, it was this huge international team of thousands of people, mostly Thai volunteers who were working so hard to get the boys out. And it was the biggest cave diving rescue that has ever been attempted, and also the first of its kind, first cave diving rescue with children that has ever been attempted.
I remember when this happened, and it's truly amazing. The first part when they found them all alive after 10 days, and then to get them all out, everyone came out. So yeah, it's just
Yes.
amazing.
Yes, it was a big international story. I mean, at the time when it was happening, it was on news all over the world. It was the biggest news story of that year.
Yeah, so which leads into my next question. What made you want to write this book?
Yeah, so my family is from Thailand. My dad is Thai, and he immigrated to the United States, and then I was born in the US. But we still have family that lives in Thailand, and my dad lives over there right now. We have been visiting Thailand at the time. So when all of this was taking place, my family and I were in Thailand, and we were, hanging out with cousins and uncles, and all of a sudden this big news story comes on about this team of kids who's trapped in the cave, and we were watching it unfold there, and we're just getting more and more enmeshed in the story as it goes on until the moment where they're all rescued. And so when the rescue happened successfully and they were able to get all 13 people out, which was like such a miracle, I just knew that I really wanted to write a book about this. It had so much that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to write about Thai culture, the Thai people, Buddhism, and spiritual practices, and also because the story is about the kids that were in the cave. Like, they were just as heroic as anyone who was trying to rescue them. And so I really felt like their story needed to be told for young people.
So in the past, you've written picture books, you've written chapter books. What was the process like to write this book, a nonfiction book? Was it a lot different than what you've done in the past?
A lot different. So different. So this was my first nonfiction book. And so it was a huge stretch for me to write it. I really had to jump at the chance and then try to figure it out later. Like, I had to go for it and be like, ask this publisher, like, please, will you trust me to write this book? And I will figure out how to write nonfiction as I'm going. So, everything that went into the book, I had to have a source for. So I couldn't normally, when I'm writing my stories, I can make up, everything's coming from my imagination. But with this book, I couldn't do that. So I had to have, I used news reports. I went to books. I researched a lot about caves, about cave diving, about geology, about the weather and engineering and, survival. And so all of that went into the book. And probably, my biggest source of information was interviews. So I knew when I was going to write it, I knew I would have to go back to Thailand and interview the people who were involved in the story. And so getting in touch with those people and asking them if they would talk to me and share what happened during the rescue, kind of like piecing this story together bit by bit from dozens of people. I interviewed people who were in the military. I interviewed people who were cavers, people who were divers. I interviewed people who they just volunteered to like pack meals for the military who was going into this cave. It was a very essential need that they had, and so they just volunteered to do whatever they could. And then I interviewed the boys' family members and interviewed their monks at their temple, and then at the very end of my research trip, I was able to interview the boys and their coach themselves. So all of that went into the story, and so it's about like gathering all this information and then pulling it all together and writing the story of what happened.
Speaking of the interviews, I feel like the story that you told with all 13 is slightly different than what we saw on the news. I feel like the news, it was all focused on the divers and their background and how they were helping to get the boys and their coach out. You say in your author's note that you kind of wanted to tell the story of everyone else that was involved, like the Get It Done crew and Didnt with his crew trying to divert water from the caves. Is there anyone's story that you talked to that you weren't able to include?
No, I mean, I really was really seeking out the people that I wanted to tell their stories in the book. So right, exactly. Like for example, Tanet, he was the water engineer that really was helping to try to stop the water from getting into the cave and trying to pump the water out of the cave, because there was so much water that they could not dive through this cave and get in there. So like I just stumbled upon him from like a little tiny article that somebody posted on social media. But he was not part of like, you know, he didn't get interviewed on Good Morning America. He didn't get interviewed on, you know, the BBC or anything like this. But his part was so important, so crucial. And he ended up being someone who like, he had all these amazing photographs that he could share with me that went into the book, all this behind the scenes information. So, you know, the experience of interviewing him and then all the other people that none of the other media really talked to, that really showed me that sometimes when we see things on television, we're not getting the full story. You know, like it really depends who's telling the story and what they bring to it, what they determine as important to go into a book, you know?
Yeah, and it was just so interesting to see their story. Like, just diverting all of that water, it's amazing that
Yes.
they had to do this.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, really, like, you just cannot imagine how, like, millions and millions of gallons of water, like swimming pools full of water coming out of that cave every minute. That's how much it was.
amazing. And you kind of touched on this before, but all 13, it mainly focuses on the rescue of the 12 boys and their coach trapped in the caves. But you also had sections talking about the culture and religion in Thailand. How important was this to you to have these sections included?
From the very beginning, I knew I was going to want to talk about that because that is a huge part of the rescue. So most of the people who live in Thailand, they are Buddhist. That's their faith. They follow the teachings of the Buddha. And most of the boys who are inside the cave were Buddhist. And then there was one boy who was Christian. But they all, you know, meditation is something that is a big part of Buddhist practice, and that it's something that anybody can do. And it's something that the team would do together. And so like their coach, who had lived as a monk, a Buddhist monk in a temple for years before he became a soccer coach, he taught them all how to meditate. And, you know, he would teach them to do this before their soccer games. So anytime they had a game, he would have them meditate before the game, you know, like just like clear their mind, just like, you know, breathe, bring yourself to this present moment. Don't let your mind like worry about this or that. Just kind of like clear it out, right? And so when they were trapped underground, I mean, 10 days, I said that so lightly, but it really is incredible when you think about like being underground for 10 hours would be a lot, you know, like that would be really intense. So 10 days, they had no food. They had very little chance to have light. Like they had flashlights, but they didn't hardly turn them on. So they were in this really desolate, really scary situation. And the way they got through that was by meditating. You know, they would calm themselves down, calm down their heartbeat, you know, lower their blood pressure. All of that helped them to survive. And you know, when they finally were going to do the rescue, a big part of why the rescuers thought that the kids could make it and they could try, because the thing that they did with the kids was like so risky. Everyone was really worried about it. But one of the reasons they wanted to try it is because the boys were so healthy. They were healthy physically, but they were healthy mentally. So that means, you know, their faith was a big part of why they survived and why the rescue was successful. So they contributed to that too.
Yeah, to have that many people and no one panicked is, a testament to them with their meditation and their religion, just to calm themselves and to keep them in a really good headspace when they're in this terrible place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things I learned by, you know, researching about survival, is that you think about survival, you think about like, you know, your body, you think about like what you're physically going to do, if you're going to have enough water, enough food. Really, survival is all mental. Like if you don't stay positive, if you don't stay calm and like make good decisions, then that's when you don't survive. Like the people who make it out of a really bad situation, they're very mentally strong.
For sure. So now that you have a nonfiction book under your belt, do you have any interest in writing another nonfiction book?
Yes, and actually I have some more nonfiction that's coming out. I have 2 nonfiction picture books. So I have one about climate change, and it's called To Change a Planet, and that's coming in August. And I have a biography of Senator Tammy Duckworth. So she's a senator from Illinois, and that is coming out in September. It's called A Life of Service. And I'm working on another nonfiction book right now that's for this age group. It's like, the age of all 13 readers. And it's called Made in Asian America. So it's Asian American history in our country, the history of Asian Americans from Columbus to the present day. So it's very different from all 13, but lots of the things that I learned in writing all 13 are going into that book.
Before you were an author, you worked in the science field. You have a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering and a master's degree in science education. Could you tell us a little bit about that part of your life and how did you get into that field?
Yeah, I mean, I always liked math and science. It was something that was interesting to me. And so when I went to college, when you go to college, you have like all these things that you can pick and what you want to study. And so I was like, well, I really like this. I'm going to go for engineering. And so I studied mechanical engineering, and after I got out of college, I worked as an engineer for a little while. I really found my passion, though, when I started working in a science museum, because all my life I loved working with kids. Like I would always be a babysitter or, work at a summer camp or, anytime I could be around kids, I really loved that. So when I worked at the Science Museum, I was designing exhibits that were for kids about science. And so I got to talk about the things that were really interesting to me, but I got to work with kids all the time. So that was just like totally perfect job for me. And when I was working at the museum, that's when I started writing books for kids too. And so that just kind of became its own thing. And I had to leave my other work because now I have so many books that I'm working on. But yeah, so all of these things, they all kind of go together. They all fit in this funny way.
So yeah, and I feel like all 13 kind of fits with your science background in a way, because it is kind of STEM focused, that science, technology, engineering, math, focused in the real world, because they had to look at all of these different solutions to try to get the boys out.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's one thing that I loved learning about the rescue was, so many times I think we think about, science and math is something that I learn about in school. Well, here is like the real world, like in real time. If they're going to save these people's lives, they have to utilize it right then and now. And really the biggest part of STEM that everybody used, even the people who weren't engineers, even the people who were not like scientists and engineers involved in the rescue, like the people who were in the military, the other volunteers and the divers, was problem solving. So that was a huge part of the book, is like, okay, you're thrown into this big crisis. People's lives are on the line. You have a short time window. You have a short amount of resources. How are you going to solve this problem? It was just so interesting to hear, like the Air Force major who was in charge of his squadron that was advising the Thai military, talk about how they're going to go in, they're going to like spend the very first thing they do is they like just get all the information, get every piece of information, come back together, brainstorm solutions, pick the best ones, rehearse them, poke holes in all the solutions. It was all of this engineering problem solving that I learned when I was in school, and they were putting it together and, putting it to use in real life. So that was just so great.
I know, and having you doing this author talk with us, it is part of a grant that we received from Missouri State Library to have STEM programming at our branches this summer. So Kids at 8 or 9 of our branches will be doing problem-solving type STEM programming. So it's really, it all comes together. You can use it in the real world. It's not just something that is happening at school and you're never going to use it again. Have you seen other libraries do this kind of thing where they take all 13 and kind of inspire programming to do other STEM type things?
Yeah, I mean, I have seen definitely teachers in the classroom doing stuff. And so, like, I've seen really cool things where kids will break up into teams and they will, you know, before they learn how the kids actually got out, just when they're learning about, okay, you've got these kids trapped in this cave, you know where they are, how are you going to get them out? And so they brainstorm their idea, they make a prototype, they test it out, and they present it to their class, which is like, that's exactly what real, you know, professional engineers do. So all of that is so great to see.
Yeah, because it'll take you through life. You have to look at all the different solutions and see which one works best. Because even the one that they chose, they didn't know for sure it was going to work, but it seemed like the best solution at the time.
Right, yes, exactly. And I mean, I tell kids all the time, like, you know, writing a book, I just use my engineering all the time when I'm writing a book. You know, you have these constraints. You have like, okay, you're going to try to go for this many pages. I'm writing for this age group. I've got this thing, this like vision, this goal I'm going towards. And now I have to solve the problem. And like every page, every chapter, I'm solving this problem, you know? So it's not just in the sciences too, it's in the arts. So it's really, you know, it's STEAM. It's not just STEM.
Yes. We have to remember that A, arts. Well, I mentioned in the intro that All 13 and A Wish in the Dark both received a Newbery Honor in 2021. How did it feel to have 2 of your books get Newbery Honors?
Oh, just so weird. So I could not believe it. I mean, I just never thought I would get 1. Never. And just have 2, I was like, I don't think you have the right person. When they called to tell me, I was like, I may have even sounded rude because I feel like I was like, this is not right. They called the wrong person. And what if I say thank you, but they didn't mean to call me? Like, I just could not believe it. It means so much. You know, and both of the books are set in Thailand. Both are so different. You know, one's nonfiction and one is this fantasy. So that is in itself so meaningful, you know.
So we talked all about All 13, but I don't want to pass up the opportunity to also talk about your newest book that came out in April, The Last Mapmaker. Could you tell us a little bit about that book?
Yes, yeah, I have it right here. So The Last Mapmaker, this is also a fantasy novel. So like if you liked A Wish in the Dark, you would like The Last Mapmaker. And it is the story of a girl who is an apprentice to a mapmaker. And she is kind of like hiding secrets about her past. She kind of wants to run away from who she is and who her family is. And so her employer gets invited to go on this expedition, this ocean expedition, to go and make a map of a mysterious continent. So she jumps at that chance to get on board this ship. But when she gets on there, she learns like everyone on board is also keeping secrets, and there's some mutinies being planned, there's some treachery. She has to decide like who she's gonna trust, who will she betray, you know, in order to go for this goal, this destiny that she wants to try to find.
Wow, it sounds like quite the adventure.
It's good. Yeah, it's an adventure for sure.
So you told us a little bit about you have 2 picture book nonfictions, another nonfiction coming out. Can you tell us anything else that you're working on?
Yes, yeah. I think probably some people who are watching would be excited to hear I have a graphic novel that's coming in September. So this is really different, and this is it's a memoir, so it's based on my life, and it's called The Tryout, and it is the story of when I tried out for cheerleader in the 7th grade. And it's illustrated by this amazing illustrator named Joanna Kakeo, and I think Joanna has like just this perfect way of connecting with what it's like to be in middle school, like how awkward it is and like how funny things are, and just like, you know, they're kind of funny and embarrassing at the same time. And it's also very, very sweet. So when I was in 7th grade, if you wanted to try out for cheerleader, and this is in Texas, I don't know what it was like, you know, in Missouri, but you had to try out in front of the entire grade. So every kid in your 7th grade would go into the gym and sit on the bleachers and watch you as you performed your cheer. And then afterwards, they voted on if they thought you should make the squad. So like if you have ever watched like The Voice or something like that, like this is even more terrifying. This is all your peers voting for you, right? And so there's a lot of humor, but also a lot of like, it's also horrifying, you know?
Oh my gosh, that sounds like one of the scariest things that could ever happen. Oh
Yes.
my goodness.
Definitely. I mean, talk about kids being brave. Kids are so brave.
So brave. Wow. So, Christina, I just want to thank you so much for talking with us today about all 13 and the Last Mapmaker, and just really appreciate you taking the time with us today.
Thank you so much, Emily. This was so great to talk to you, and thank you everyone for watching.
All right, so we want to thank our author, Christina Soontornvat, for joining us, and to HEC Media, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, and the Missouri State Library. Also our bookseller, The Novel Neighbor. Remember, you can purchase all 13 and The Last Mapmaker at thenovelneighbor.com. Thank you so much for watching.